Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quinn, K8QS.
And I'm Tom W89TDD.
And some of you know through QRZ or YouTube especially that we posted a video about 2 weeks ago with an idea about forming only two classes of ham radio license. Now, let me say right up front that Tom and I are extremely grateful for the amount of responses we got. We'll talk a little bit about those. We'll tabulate them for you. But what we were doing was responding to the Federal Communications Commission's call, which is a call now for all of the regulatory agencies, not just the FCC, to quote unquote delete, delete, delete. By that, what they really meant was to simplify, show ways to cut costs, show programs that could be eliminated. And let me say, too, after talking with the FCC and talking with a very good friend of mine who's an attorney in the communications field and knows a lot of this stuff backwards and forwards, that there's really no plan at the FCC to delete ham radio. That's not on the table. And I'll say more about some of the people who responded that way to the FCC as if we were on the chopping block. We are not. But we went through all of the data because we felt it would be helpful as a sounding board here for the Federal Communications Commission to use our YouTube channel, Ham Radio Perspectives, which, by the way, is not a commercial channel. It's not monetized. We're not using clickbait to try to get a whole bunch of people to respond or to post things or to view it. We're trying to do this as a service to the hobby. That's really what it's all about. We love this hobby. We've been in it for a long time. And in fact, there are going to be changes of some kind coming forth. What's happened, Tom, I discovered in talking with the FCC and this attorney friend of mine, is that the current administration sent a note out on this, delete, 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 to simplify and cut costs and all. So all of the agencies have formed teams, and the teams are looking at ways of doing this. And if you want to go and look at the FCC call for comments, you can do that. I checked yesterday, I think it was maybe 265 or 270 comments were filed, mostly by hams and then by a few ham agencies to the FCC. And I'll talk about summarizing some of those in just a moment. So there's a lot of commentary out there on all of this, but a lot of it doesn't understand what the FCC was calling for, unfortunately. So we looked at all of the QRZ comments that people have posted. We tried to respond to a lot of them. We were not going, if somebody was snarky or nasty toward us or whatever, and this happens in social media all the time, we were not going to respond to that stuff, just ignore it. But thank people, even if people disagreed but had some good comments. So we looked at the QRZ comments. We looked at all of the YouTube comments where we posted the video originally. Direct mail. This is interesting, Tom. I got a lot of direct email from people who had looked at the video either on QRZ or on YouTube, but they didn't want to post because they were fearful that other hams would be upset with them or respond negatively to them. And I get that.
Right.
Okay. I'm somewhat of a media figure myself. If you go to my QRZ page, you'll see I've been on Mike Rowe's program and many others. And what happens when you get out there in the public limelight in any way is that people come out of the woodwork and will be negative about things, and sometimes very unfairly so. So I get that. But at any rate, we looked at all of that email, and I think I responded to everyone. If I didn't respond to someone, it's only because being so busy, I accidentally missed it, not because I was upset that you responded to me directly. We also looked a bit at licensing in other countries, in part just to see what's out there, especially Western countries. And it's interesting that some of the emails I got, Tom, were from people in other countries suggesting we take a look at their systems if they thought their systems, which for the most part are 3 classes of license, though some of them with 2 classes.
Right.
And then, of course, I looked at the replies on the FCC website. Ours is on there, too, if you want to look at it. Ours is an official response, so to speak, that includes what we said in the original video. And the filing deadline is today, and Tom and I will go back and file a slight amendment that includes what we talk about today with them. So I think that's the background. Tom, why don't you go over the data? Before you do, I'm a social scientist, and I know that these are not what you would call perfectly objective data because it's just in response to what we posted here. It's not like a survey of all hams, including all hams that are inactive, just hold
Right.
licenses, and there are a lot of those. But it's just those who wanted to participate in the discussion in these different ways we talked about. Tom, what do the data look like?
Well, you might want to kind of consider this as a focus group.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, well, compiling all the data we've got, 46% were in favor of making some of the changes that we proposed. 27%.
hold on one second.
Oh,
Mainly in
okay.
terms of two classes
Correct. Right. In
of
terms of the
license,
two classes. Right.
two classes of license.
We're not going to go into the frequency allocations and power limits and testing and all that. This is just basically on converting everything to two classes of licenses like it was prior to 1951 with a Class A and a Class B.
Right.
Those totally opposed was 27%. Those that posted irrelevant comments who either didn't watch the video or didn't understand the content came in at 28%. So it looks like an overwhelming majority at 46% have some kind of favorable comment to proceeding with a two license setup.
Yeah, and we should say that, like the emails that I got, and it takes something for someone to look up the email address and formulate the email and send it, more than it takes to just throw out a quick comment online. A lot of those in favor of the two class system believed that it was not adequate to just increase the digital mode access on HF for the
Right,
beginning class. They said,
right,
okay, you're going to give a little bit of phone on 40 meters or something. That's not enough. You should give more. And so we know there's significant support out there among the QRZ and YouTube followers to go with the two class system, but they wanted to up the HF phone compared to what we had. We thought digital would be a real calling card, but in fact, a lot of people said to us, and you can read some of those on QRZ and YouTube as well, that the digital privileges themselves may not be that great, that people do a lot with technology and they have to work on email and they're texting and all. They want to be able to talk to people, you know,
right.
which was a good way to put it, I guess.
From some of the comments I read, I don't think they understood digital because
Yes,
some of the comments I read was, well, what if the internet goes down? Well, now you're talking about D-Star
right.
and and functions like that. And my position on digital is similar to how we have been using CW. It's a mode. It is not a internet-based way of communicating.
Yeah, Tom, I think we made a mistake by using that term digital there, referring to digital modes and trying to explain it the way we did. That created a lot of confusion. So, but the long and short of it is, and Tom gave you the data on this, there's a lot of support for the two class system and for upping the HF phone for the beginner class. So, what Tom and I are going to do now is go over what our proposal looks like given all of these data and the responses we've gotten to show you what seems to be the sentiment out there. And then Tom and I might disagree a little bit on this, which is okay because there are always going to be disagreement, and we are not the FCC, the ARRL. We're not QRZ officially. We don't represent the views of anyone. We are two hams who have been listening to response to a video we did because the FCC is looking to cut costs and they have teams in all the agencies to do this, including with the FCC. So we are still going to say that a good way to go is with two classes of license, and let's just give those names that are different from any of the existing names to try to avoid confusion. So we're going to call them basic and elevated. And again, they could take existing names like tech and extra, who knows, whatever. That's not for us to determine or necessarily to suggest what the names would be. And some people suggested other names that were great too, including names that were used in other countries. So let's say basic and elevated. And then within the basic, we would have all of the licensed novices, even though, of course, you can't get a novice now, but there are still many novice licensed folks. So they would be in the basic category. And then we said, Tom, that the technician
Right.
class would be there. So those two automatically get rolled into what we're going to call the basic, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then we have the second class, which is called elevated above,
Right.
that is to say, the basic. And there we have all of the extra class licensees. The advanced class, you can't get an advance anymore, but they're still out there. And that, remember, we talked about last time, was really the hardest license to get in terms of the
Yeah.
technical aspects of the exam. Then the general gets moved in there as well. So you have in that second category now, or the second class of the two, you have the extra, advanced, and the general. And it's divided up that way. Am I right on that, Tom?
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So those are the two classes in a general sense, trying to simplify licensing. And, you could say that the FCC shouldn't go back and someone who's listed as an advanced, give them the new nomenclature if they don't want the new nomenclature and all that stuff. But to me, it seems that just continues to increase the additional costs and regulatory burden and
Right.
confusion with a new ham who looks somebody up and their license class is something that doesn't fit, with what their knowledge of ham radio is. So, but that's an FCC kind of decision, I guess, in the end, or at least in their proposal. Now, what to do with these two? So let's say I'm going to make the case now, and then Tom is going to start to argue with me a little bit. He's going to discuss with me a little bit.
Right.
I'm going to make the case that what we ought to do is with that basic class license, give almost full privileges. Almost full privileges.
And where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line on full privileges? You say
Yes.
almost all.
Yes, almost all. So I'm thinking that if there's one thing that needs to be done there, it's going to be a reduction in power. So let's say that the basic licensee, like a novice now on CW, could do 200 watts. Now I know most rigs are at 100 watts that you buy with a typical 20 or 25 amp supply to run them. But let's say they're limited to 200 watts. And then the elevated class is, we're going back up to talking about peak envelope power here, of course, 1500. So you've got one distinction that's power, 200 and 1500. What do you think about that, Tom?
I agree with you on the power limits. What I would disagree with you is on the frequency allocations.
Okay, so before we get into the frequency allocations, just on the power level one, I know some people are going to say, well, how do you know how much power somebody is using, right? And how can that be really regulated? Why have a rule in the books, a law that you can't really do much with? Well, look at, no matter what the lower power level is, some people will monkey around with that and run higher power. No doubt about that. But the fact of the matter is that most hams now, we know, you get on the air and find out most hams don't run more than 100 watts anyway.
Right.
And I know people, I've known people over the years. I think I talked about this guy in the Chicago area where we grew up one time who was a big time DXer. He's passed away, but I still don't want to mention him by name. But he ran 10,000 watts on sideband in the closet next to his shack, locked with the key he showed me. Opened it up. His 4CX 10,000 in there, or whatever it was. And there are people that run too much power over the 1500. But typically with these distinctions in license classes across the countries, there is a power difference. And we
Right.
could say, how much should that be? So you and I kind of agree on that. Let's say 200 watts and 1500 watts. So that's one way of distinguishing. Then we get into the other area that we think is significant to address, and that is the area of which modes and frequencies. And I have been converted by people who have corresponded with me and posted in these channels that we put our video out on, that limiting the second class, the upper class, elevated, extra, whatever we call it, to just a selection, small selection on 40 phone and then giving them 10 and 12 meter privileges is not enough. Do you agree with that?
I would propose similar to the restrictions we had as a general, with limitations on the upper or lower end of the CW and the phone band. And then with your elevated level, opening up the whole band as it currently is now with the generals or the advanced, well, the extras. The extras have all the bandwidth.
Okay, you
So
misspoke a little bit there, Tom. I knew what you meant to say, but with the distinctions that are out there now, it's the extras that get the extra phone
correct,
privileges on the lower end of the phone
correct,
bands, not the upper end, the
right.
lower ends.
So I would limit your basic license to what currently is like the general frequencies of the HF bands. Your elevated level gets everything similar to the extras.
Okay, so that would mean the
And
advanced.
right, and I hate to use the word incentive, but it's more of a privilege with your elevated license. You get more usable band. I'm also in favor, though, of using some of that portion for digital modes.
Right. And in fact, there are some really good comments in filing to the FCC about changing the baud rates and this problem we have with amplifiers where you can't use an amplifier that uses a tube or transistor, rather, that the newer transistors that have this high percentage of increase, right? You know, you put 15 watts in and you get
Yeah,
2,000 watts out. Well,
right.
that's ridiculous. That should be changed. No question about it. And who's going to know that you're using that anyway? It's just a matter of not approving manufactured amplifiers. So all of the people who posted stuff to the FCC on that were in total agreement. So what we're really down to here, Tom, is with this system that we're suggesting of two classes of licenses, making it as simple as possible, and what to do with the modes and the frequencies exactly. And I considered, and some people said in comments on QRZ and YouTube, and also in direct email to me, that all HF phone privileges should be opened up to the beginner class,
Right.
not just to the advanced, let's call it the elevated or extra. And you could make an argument for that, you know, and I would be willing to support that. I'm not one of these people, Tom, that would say, "Oh, I got my extra class by FCC exam back in 19 whenever it was, you know, 70 something or other, and therefore, you know, I'm this is not fair that other people have my privileges." I don't agree with that kind of thinking at all.
I mean, I had an advance for the longest time, and I didn't upgrade until extra, just because of the fear of this FCC changing their policy and restrictions. That at least I would have the superior license. But I was very happy with an advance. So
Yeah.
let's face it. In today's parlance, it's a participation trophy.
Okay. So one way of looking at this then is that when it comes to HF privileges, things could stay the same with microwave, let's say, as they are now. No
Right,
microwave with the lower class license. But when it comes to what to do with the upper class, then maybe half of the HF phone privileges are open to the beginner class, approximately half, except
right,
continuing with what we said before, 10 meters, 12 meters, completely opened because
right.
there's no pressure on the band there.
No.
And,
And
and so,
it's a very sporadic band anyway due to the atmospherics.
right. And which leads us to the third thing that we want to talk about briefly, and that is the exams. Now, a term that was used frequently in comments online, I don't recall if it was used in the FCC filings. It may have been by a couple of people, but it was fairly frequently on YouTube and QRZ. Nobody used it, I think, in direct email to me, was that what we're talking about is dumbing down the hobby. Now, this is a term I've heard used since the beginning of incentive licensing.
Yeah,
I mean, this goes way, way back. We're dumbing down the hobby. We're dumbing down the hobby. We're going to have all these dummies running around. I want to know where all these dummies are because I don't hear that many. On CW, I don't hear them. On phone, I don't hear them. On the digital modes that you're heavy into, has the hobby really dumbed down along the way? I think that it has not. And in fact, some people will say, well, we'll become more like CB. I don't think so. You don't hear a lot like CB on the HF phone bands. There are a few frequencies we could talk about where a few folks hang out and kind of act like, not even like most CBers act, or certainly not like GMRS and all. Did I say that right? GRMS,
yeah.
GRMS.
GMRS.
GMRS. I mean, this is just wrong. The dumbing down doesn't happen. What people mean, I think, by the dumbing down is that people are not going to know so much technically about the hobby.
Yeah,
You know, that they're not going to go out there and build all of their own rigs.
right,
Well, people are not going to go out for the most part and build their own rigs. That's just not going to happen anymore. The hobby is way beyond that from the way it was in the early days with two-class system that they had, which was mostly, you know, Class A, Class B, and then the conditional, but it mostly had to do with whether or not you had CW or phone privileges. So I think this dumbing down thing is overloaded as an argument. And with that, Tom, I'm going to add that sometimes when they say dumbing down, what they mean is that people don't know how to operate.
correct.
They don't.
There's no emphasis on procedure and just general politeness and honorability.
Yes,
I don't know that you can drive honorability into people's skulls, but you certainly can work on the procedures.
yes. The way I like to put that as an academic, Tom, is to be virtuous, which means
True.
good
Yeah.
character. Be a person
Yeah.
of good character. You know, patient, honest, long suffering, and so on. We could go through all of this, but respectful of other people. I mean, all of that is just, there's part of human nature that there are going to be problems. And there always have been. In fact, Tom, I was thinking about this, and I don't think I mentioned it in our first video, but I remember back in the early 60s, before I got my first ticket, when I would listen to a 75 meter AM in the morning before heading off to school with a little shortwave, portable shortwave receiver I had, I would hear hams calling CQ this way. Hello, CQ from such and such a station. Then they would say, no lids, LIDS, no lids, no kids, Class A only. They would
Right.
say that.
Yeah.
That's like saying,
Right.
if you're an inferior operator, don't talk to me. I don't want any kids out there. If you're not experienced, you know, well, hey, we don't need any of that kind of attitude either. So there's an attitude sometimes of being elitist.
Right.
We don't want people that can't live up to our standards. Well, I think the learning of the standards is through what used to be called Elmering, which is really a kind of mentoring, or through the local clubs and the groups that give the exams. They should be the ones that give examples, and they get rigs going and say, here's how it works. I'm going to demonstrate it for you, and listen in, and come back to meetings we're going to have where we're going to talk a little bit more about this. What do you do when somebody moves in on your frequency and so on? These are things that have to be learned. Virtue has to be learned. None
Right.
of us as little kids comes out of the chute, so to speak, being virtuous people. You'll learn this from other people. So this dumbing down stuff, I think, is overwrought. Now, but the final point for us to make on this is that we haven't said a lot about what should be in the exams if we have a two-class system. So Tom and I agree on this, that the class for the basic ham license should be primarily about rules and regulations rather
And
than about
procedure.
electronics.
And procedure.
And procedure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rules, regulations, procedure. So you and I are 100% in agreement on that, aren't we?
Right. That's absolutely.
Okay. So that's another way to get some of that in there. And maybe it should be a little more comprehensive on those and a little bit longer exam than it currently is, with more on things like rules, regulations, procedure. So that's the basic. Now, what to do about the elevated class, that the advanced and the general and the extra all become part of? What to do on that? That, we think, should be even a little more on the technology and technical side. Do you
Right.
agree with that?
I agree. Agree that it should be on the more technical side, that it shouldn't be something you could know by rote memorization. You should be able to have it basically the way we did when we were back at our generals back way back when you were given a circuit diagram and you had to describe certain values of the components and stuff. Not real difficult math, simple Ohm's law, capacitance stuff, just to show that you have a modicum of technical ability. How do
Yeah.
you how do you calculate a dipole? How is a dipole length different from a vertical?
Hmm.
Just something to get ingrained into your head that there's a technical aspect to this hobby that'll lead to advancement.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't mean that knowing that material would not be important for the basic license. It's just to say with a basic license, you can go out much more now than in the past and buy a manufactured antenna, a manufactured rig, and get on the air pretty easily. But if you want to move ahead and you want to have the honor that's associated with the
Right.
elevated class, you have to demonstrate some medium modicum of technical knowledge or ability. I mean, you have to know the difference maybe between on a schematic diagram, an antenna and a ground, because that'll get you into trouble real fast if
Yeah.
you don't know that one. We're kidding around a little bit, but you get the idea here and the way these two could be framed. And you yourselves out there watching this can decide whether any of this is a good idea or not. But we think it would be a tremendous simplification compared to what we now have, and it would work well. It would attract more people to the hobby. It would give clubs and those who give the exams. I was once an examiner too, in one of the examining groups, a little more to shoot for in terms of helping to teach some of the procedures and rules and regulations and all, and explain those as part of the process of study, group study, and all to get the basic license. So there you have it, gang. This is from just the two of us looking at the responses that you all had. And again, we thank you for the many responses. We're grateful for the number of people that even took the time to respond directly to the FCC. And having talked to people at the FCC and also talked to quite a few of you directly and talked to an attorney who's in the communication field, I think something like what we've outlined here would have a possibility of going forward. How much money it would save, how much simpler it would be. Listen, this is not big money, right, compared to what the FCC wants to save in other ways. But we need to keep the hobby going. We need to keep it alive, not just with older folks like us, and bring some excitement, especially I think with the basic license for people to get them onto the HF bands, even if they then get into higher frequency bands or get into experimentation and all with the elevated license. Tom, I know you've been studying the GMRS folks out there a lot, and you monitored the frequencies quite a bit driving back from Florida to your Indiana home. And that's quite a remarkable thing. Anything you want to say about the success of GMRS?
I'm too early into it, but what I've noticed is primarily and most interesting is all the GMRS repeaters. I believe there's 7 frequencies or channels for the repeaters, which makes it much easier when you're traveling to not have to look at your repeater guide manual and find out who's where, what the offset is, and the CTC's SS code. I mean, you can just put it on scan, and somewhere along the line, you're going to be able to hit one of the repeaters. But generally, I've noticed because GMRS is mostly family focused. A
Hmm.
lot of these licensees, actually, a lot of these licensees are hams, but they use it for family communications. They have a son, a daughter, a wife that doesn't want to get their license. They get a GMRS license. That's good for the whole family without having to have any technical testing or protocol.
And
It's a very basic license that allows you to use up to 50 watts as a fixed station,
mhm.
which I found real interesting. But
and
they
did
seem to be a real friendly down home group. I haven't heard anything obnoxious on any of the GMRS frequencies I've been on.
isn't that interesting? That's exactly what I was going to ask you about because if you were thinking about dumbing down happening, you would find that especially with something like GMRS, where it's a box top license. You fill out the form and send it in as you did, and you and your family are licensed, and there they don't have like an ARRL. I mean, there are some
Um,
groups organized and all, but it's so I think there's a lot of opportunity on this, Tom. And we would love, once again, to get your responses if you have any, and you can write directly to me or Tom as well. Let us know what you think. We're going to file a little addendum with the FCC today because today is the last day that you can file in response to the FCC's delete, delete, delete. And today is April 28th, just in case you're watching this video later. We're grateful for all of your responses, everybody. It's been quite an interesting development. The We have a little window here with this delete, delete, delete business that there may be some changes that would otherwise be slower coming. And anything that the FCC does, of course, in the future, they're going to have to run through the traditional proposal and comments and all of that. So they may decide not to do too much. Although, Tom, I've got to say, the way the current administration in Washington is working, with a lot of administrative decisions being made that are I don't want to put it too strongly and say forced upon agencies because I don't know the law well enough to say forced upon. My son tried to explain that to me one time because he's got some legal background and I couldn't even understand it talking to him. These agencies are an interesting phenomenon because they're under the central administration, but they're separate and they have over the years operated more and more like the Department of Education or whatever in their own way. So thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate it a lot. Thanks for the overwhelmingly positive responses that you had, even when you disagree with us and trying to get some movement going on this. And if there's any way we can serve any of you, get on maybe with your local club or something and have a conversation, let us know. So again, this is Ham Radio Perspectives. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's not clickbait. I think you'll enjoy the videos that we do. We put time and effort into them, some of them about the history of the hobby. Nobody else is doing that kind of thing. I'm Quinn, Quin, K8QS.
And I'm Tom, WA9TDD. Be curious, read a book.
Yeah, there you go. Be curious about all this. Keep an open mind. Let's see where things can go, not just with this, but in life and in the country in general. 73, everybody.